Hello, everyone. So I'm sorry that I can't be there in person tonight. Baruch Hashem, it's for a simcha. But thanks to the marvels of modern technology, I can be there even though I'm not there. So we're holding on Reish Mem Beis Amud Aleph, and we are up to Siman Shin Ayin Beis Sif Tez Zayin. So we've been speaking until now. We have two chatzeros, and we're talking about what constitutes a divider between two chatzeros and what does not. So just to recapture what we're talking about, we have Chatzer A and Chatzer B. If there's a fence that's 10 tfachim tall between Chatzer A and Chatzer B, so then there are two independent Chatzerim, and each one could make their own individual Eruva Chatzeros. They can't combine and create one joint combined Eruva Chatzeros because they don't have access one to the other. They're two individual Chatzeros. If you have a fence between Chatzer A and Chatzer B, and there's a doorway going from Chatzer A to Chatzer B, so there's a doorway in the fence, then they have a choice. If they want, they could use the doorway, and they could join into one combined Erev, because they do have access one to the other. They have access through the doorway. Or, if they want, they could say, you know what, we opt to close the doorway. Doesn't mean that they have to physically close it, but a doorway could be viewed as being open, it could be viewed as being closed. You could use it, you could not use it. So they could say, we don't want to be one chatzer. We want to be considered two independent chatzeros. So then they could each make their own independent eruve chatzeros. And again, the difference is going to be very simple. If they make one joint combined eruve chatzeros, so then you could take a keli sheshavas babayis in one chatzer, in the house in one chatzer. So you could take a lawn chair from a bungalow in colony A, and you could bring it through the doorway, through the gate in the fence, and you could bring it into the chatzer of colony B if they make one combined eruv. If they opt instead to make two independent eruvin, so then in colony A they could take a lawn chair from the bungalow to the chatzer, or from the chatzer to the bungalow, and so too in colony B. But they can't go from one to the other. Now we're going to talk about a case where we don't have a fence going between Chatzer A and Chatzer B. Instead, we have a ditch between Chatzer A and Chatzer B. So let's see what the Mechaber says. Zok the Mechaber. Chritz shebein shtei chatzeros. Let's say you have a ditch between two chatzeros. So you have colony A and colony B, and there's a ditch that's running between colony A and colony B. Amoy kasara, and the ditch is 10 tfachim deep, v'rachav arba, and the ditch is 4 tfachim across, from one edge to the other edge, so you have a 4 tefach gap running between colony A and colony B. That's going to make a separation between the two chatzeros. Ein yechalin la'arev yachad, they cannot make one joint combined erev. So the 10 tefach deep and 4 tefach across ditch is the same as if there would actually be a mechitza running between the two. Let's stop over here for a second and see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Zok the Mishnah Berurah in Eis Katan Kuf Yod Zayin. Chritz shebein shtei chatzeros. If you have a ditch that runs between two chatzeros, Perush, the explanation of this is, Shaloi haya beinein shum mechitza hamafsekes. You don't have any kind of fence or any kind of wall between the two chatzeros. Rak chritz ba'alma. Instead, you have a ditch that runs between the two chatzeros. Eis Katan Kuf Yod Ches, Amoik Asara. We said that this ditch is 10 tfachim deep. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Shekishem shemechitza gavaya asara mafsekes bein reshuyos. The same way a mechitza, a wall or a gate between the chatzeros, makes a hefsek, it makes a divider between the two chatzeros if it's 10 tfachim tall. Kain chritz, so to a ditch, shehu amoik shir zeh, that has a depth of 10 tfachim, gam kain mechalik reshuyos. That also is going to divide the two chatzeros. Now the Mishnah Berurah makes a very important point. Umayri, we have to be talking about a case. Shacharitz heilich b'chol oirech hachatzeros mikotze el kotze. We have to be talking about a case where the ditch runs for the entire length between the two chatzeros. Why? De'im nechsar arba tvachim. Because let's say there would be a 4 tefach long area between the two chatzeros where there was no ditch. So let's say the two chatzeros are 20 amas long, and you have a ditch that runs between the two chatzeros, but somewhere in the middle there's an area where there is no ditch. And that area where there's no ditch is at least 4 tefachim long. Then says the Mishnah Berurah, I'll just find a place here again, because if there would be a 4 tefach long area where there is no ditch, so then what do we have? We have a ditch separating between two chatzeros, but we have a 4 tefach area where there is no ditch. Well, that 4 tefach area you could use to walk from chatzer A to chatzer B. So that's like a doorway. That's just like you would have colony A and colony B, and you have a fence separating them, and you have a 4 tefach gate in the fence. So we say, okay, you have a doorway between the two chatzerim. So now if you want, you can make one joint combined erev, or if you want, you could stay separate. So too over here. Over here, the divider is the ditch. But if the ditch doesn't run the whole way, if there's a 4 tefach area where there is no ditch, then that 4 tefach area is a doorway between the two chatzeros. Then the halacha would be, if you want, you could join in one combined erev. If you want, you could make 2 independent deruvin. So the Mishnah Berurah makes the point over here, when the mechaber says that the ditch separates the two chatzeros, and since they're separate, they cannot make one joint combined erev, that's only if the ditch goes the entire length of the two chatzeros. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ice Cotton Kuf Yud Tes, that this ditch has to be 4 tefachim deep. V'rachav arba tefachim, if it's if it's 4 tefachim across from one chatzer to the other. The pachas bikan, because if it would be less than 4 tefachim across, noyach lepasan misvasai asvasai, it would be very easy to step over from one side to the other side. V'loy chashav hefsek, and then there would be no divider between the two chatzeros. So too, when the mechaber says that the ditch has to be 4 tefachim across, it has to be 4 tefachim across for the entire length of the two chatzeros. Let's say it was not that way. Let's say you would have the ditch running between the two chatzeros, and somewhere in the middle, the ditch becomes narrow. So now it's only 2 tefachim across from edge to edge. Well, if that area would be 4 tefachim long, then that would constitute a Pesach. That area where it's easy to step over because it's not 4 tefachim wide, that area would be a Pesach between the two chatzeros. And then again, the halacha would be, if they want, they could join in a combined erev. If they want, they could make 2 separate eruvin. Like he says here, for the entire length of the ditch, it has to be 4 tefachim across. Like we're going to see later on in Seif Yud Zayin. Now the mechaber is going to talk about, what if you fill the ditch up with something? So all right, it depends what you fill it up with and what you do. So the mechaber said so far, if you have a ditch that's 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim across, that constitutes a divider between the two chatzeros. They cannot join in a combined eruv. They're going to have to instead make 2 separate eruvin. So we left off over here in the mechaber, ein yecholim la'arev yachad. They cannot join in a combined eruv because the two chatzeros are considered divided because of the ditch. Now the mechaber says this is true. Afilu malei teven v'kash. Even if you happen to have filled up the ditch with stubble and with straw. Now, stubble and straw that we're talking about over here, like the Mishnah Berurah says in Ice Cotton Kuf Chaf, Teven V'kash, we're talking about tevel and straw, Sharoi Lamachal Behema, that could be used for animal fodder. So we're talking about you filled up the ditch with something that has a use. And this is a use that could even be for Shabbos. Even on Shabbos, your animals have to eat. So the mechaber says, you cannot join in one erev, afilu mole teven v'kash, even if you filled up the ditch with teven and kash that could be used as animal fodder, still you can't make one joint combined erev. Because even though you filled the ditch up with something that's very usable, and we're afraid that you're going to take it out. Kolzman shaloi bitloi. As long as you didn't nullify it. What does that mean that you nullified it? The Mishnah Berurah is going to say, at least according to most opinions, if you go ahead and you make a verbal statement and you say, I filled up the ditch with teven v'kash, and I am leaving the teven and the kash there. I have no intent to take the teven and the kash out. Okay, then you will mavatal it, you nullified the teven and the kash. Now we're going to look at the ditch as if it's full, and since it's full, the two chatzerais are no longer divided. Now they could join into a combined eruv. But if on the other hand you filled it up with teven and kash, and you made a verbal statement and you said, I am going to leave it here, then we consider it full. But if you don't make that verbal statement, we can't consider it full. So again, so the Mechaber said over here, you can't make a combined eruv, afilu malei teven v'kash. Even if the ditch is full of teven and kash, kol zman shalei bitloi. As long as you didn't make a verbal statement saying that you're going to leave the teven and the kash here, we have to be afraid that you might take the teven and the kash out. Since we're afraid you're going to take the teven and the kash out, we have to look at the ditch as if it's empty. Since it's empty, it makes a divider between the two chatzerais, and they cannot join in a combined eruv. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Kuf Kaf Teven V'Kash Roy L'Michael Behema. We're talking about stubble and straw that's usable as animal fodder. Dem Hoya Teven V'Kash Saruach. If it was a rotten teven and kash, she'ein roy l'machal behema, that's not usable as animal fodder, dinoi ka'afar, then this teven and kash would have the same din as dirt. And we're going to see in the Mechaber that the din of dirt is va'afilu stama nami mavutal. By dirt, once you have dirt inside the ditch, we view the ditch as if it's full. And since the ditch is full, it's one big chutzner. And by dirt, you don't need a verbal statement that you're going to leave the dirt there. When you have dirt inside a ditch, we assume it's going to remain there. If you put teven and kash inside the ditch, then as long as you weren't mevatel it, we have to assume that it's going to be removed. We look at the ditch as if it's empty, and it separates the two chatzeres into two separate chatzeres. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does it mean to be mevatel the teven and the kash? Beferish, explicitly. Va'amar, and you make a verbal statement that say, Lo yishakil namehacha. I am not going to remove this teven and kash from here. The Mishnah Berurah does bring down a dissenting opinion. There are those that say, Sha'afilu lo yamar befiv, even if you didn't make a verbal declaration, rak shehiskim belibay lazeh, just you made up in your mind that you're going to leave it there, gam kein memelim isbatel, that's enough to consider the teven and the kash to be bevutel and to consider the ditch to be full. Okay, so far we saw the halacha if the ditch happens to be full of animal fodder. If the ditch is full of animal fodder, so it depends. If you made a verbal declaration that you're leaving the animal fodder there, then the ditch is considered full. Then the chatzeros are considered one chatzer, and they could join into one combined eruv. If you did not make a verbal declaration, then we have to be afraid that you might take the animal fodder out, and therefore the ditch, even though technically it's full, but since it's full of something that you might remove, we look at the ditch as being empty, and it separates the two chatzerim into two individual chatzerim, and they cannot join in one combined eruv. That's if it's full of teven and kash. Now the Mechaber says on the last line, let's say the ditch was not full of animal fodder, instead it was full of dirt and pebbles. Then the Mechaber says, afilu stama, then even without any kind of verbal declarations, shaloi bitloi, even if you weren't mevatel it, you didn't make an announcement, you didn't say, I'm leaving the offer and the tzroiros there. If it's full of offer and tzroiros, then we consider the ditch to be full, and tzrichim la'arev yachad. Now they have no choice. They could only make one joint combined eruv. They can't make two separate eruvim. There's nothing separating them. The ditch, there's no ditch. The ditch is full. The ditch is full of offer and tzroiros. So now it's one chutzner. We look at it that there's no ditch, and if they want to make an eruv, they only have one choice. They have to make one joint combined eruv. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Kuf Chav Beis, Malay Afar, if the ditch is full of dirt, Hainu Kol Oirech Achritz. This means that the entire length of the ditch is full. Ayal Kol Panim B'yoyser Me Eser Amos, or at least an area of the ditch that's separating between the two chatzeros, at least an area that's longer than 10 amos. Because remember, up until 10 amos, you're a Pesach. So let's say you had a ditch separating the two chatzeros, and you had an 8 amma area that was full of Offer and Tzroiros. Well, then we would say that the ditch makes a divider between the two chatzeros. The part of the ditch that's full is a Pesach, is a doorway between the two chatzeros, and then you have a choice. If you want, you make two separate Eruvim. If you want, you make one joint combined Eruv. So when the Mechaber says over here that if the ditch is full of Offer and Tzroiros, you have to make one Eruv, because it's one chutzner, that's because you had an area of the ditch that's longer than 10 amas that's full. Longer than 10 amas can't be a Pesach. Longer than 10 amas is a breach. So now the two chatzeros are breached to one another, so that's considered as if there's nothing separating them. So now you only have one choice. Now it's one chutzner, you can only make one joint combined Eruv. You can't make two separate Eruvim. So hainu kalayra chacharitza al kalpana b'yosem yeser amas di'alavachi, because if it's not that way, if the area of the ditch that's full is less than 10 amas, have a kepesach, that's a doorway. Then they would have the option to be able to make two separate eruvin because it's only a doorway. And the Mishnah Berurah says, "Vayter v'dan, you should know the masha kasav mole ofar." When the Mechaber uses the words mole ofar, if it's full of dirt, that's really an imprecise wording. Lav dafka, it doesn't really mean that the ditch is full, because the ditch does not have to be full to the top. The miyate amkai me'asara, even if you only filled the ditch up partially, but the ditch is no longer 10 tfachim deep, gam kein dina hachi, you would have the same din. So let's say you have Chatzer A and Chatzer B, and there's a ditch running through the whole length between cutting apart Chatzer A and Chatzer B. But you filled up the ditch halfway. So the ditch is only 5 tfachim deep. A ditch that's 5 tfachim deep does not make a separation between Chatzer A and Chatzer B. A ditch that's 5 tfachim deep is considered to be a ditch that you could walk in and walk out. So that's not a separator. So when the Mechaber said over here that the ditch is full, it doesn't have to be full. It can even only be partially full, as long as you cut down the depth less than 10 tfachim. Kuf Chav Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah says, afilu stama, when you filled up a ditch with dirt, you don't need a verbal declaration saying that you nullify the dirt and that you plan on leaving the dirt there. Ta'afar tzroros bachritz, when you have dirt and pebbles in a ditch, mistama mevutalanhein. We assume that they're nullified and we assume that they're going to stay there. There's no reason for us to assume that you're going to take them out. Now the Ramah adds in over here in the parentheses on the top of Reish Mem Beis and Beis. The Ramah says, "Va'ayin le'el simin shin nun chesiv beis." He sends you back to what he himself said earlier in Shin Nun Ches. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here in Kol Chav Daled, "Va'ayin le'el simin shin nun chesiv beis." Says the Mishnah Berurah b'Hagah. This is sending us back to the Ramah in Shin Nun Ches. The Sham hevi shtei deos. Over there, the Ramah brings two different opinions. What happens in bitloi l'Shabbos achas? Over there also, the Ramah is discussing a case where you used dirt at the base of a wall to lessen the height of the wall. And over there he brings down two opinions. What if you have a case where they put dirt over there before Shabbos, and the fellow who put the dirt there said, "I'm leaving the dirt here for Shabbos, but Sunday morning I'm coming and I'm taking this dirt because I need it to fill up a hole. So I was mevatel it for Shabbos achas. I know that I'm leaving it there for one Shabbos, but I definitely intend to remove it in the future." Is that considered a bittul, or is that not considered a bittul? And in a way, you could look at this as being even worse than stama. Stama means I didn't make any declarations. I didn't have any specific das. I put something in the hole. Over here, he had a specific das. Over here, his das was, I am taking away the dirt on Sunday morning. I'm leaving it here for Shabbos, but I am taking it away for Sunday morning. So back in Shin Nun Ches, the Ramah brought two opinions, whether or not that constitutes bittul. Is that a valid bittul? Says the Mishnah Berurah. The Sham Hevi Shtei Deis. Over there in Shin Nun Ches, the Ramah brought two different opinions. In bitloi l'Shabbos achas, if you were mevatel dirt for one Shabbos, v'daitoi l'fanoisoi achakach, but you fully intend to remove the dirt after Shabbos, im choshev bittul. Does that constitute a bittul? The Yeshomer, because there are those that say, the Kavan the Daitoi Shalo Yishar Sham La'olam, since his das was that the dirt should not remain there, loy chashiv bittel, that does not constitute a bittel. Vigara mistama, and it's even worse than not having any specific das, because over here you had specific das that you are going to remove it. Ve'ein yichaylim la'arev yachad, and if that's true, then the din would be that you cannot make one combined erev. In other words, if you had a case where there was a charitz, where there was a ditch, and you put afar and tzroiros in the ditch, but you knew, I'm going to remove this dirt on Sunday. So normally when you put dirt in a ditch and you don't have any specific das, we say, all right, you put dirt in the ditch, we assume it's going to remain there. So there is no ditch, and now the two chatzeres could combine into one joint combined erev. But now we have a case where a person filled up the ditch, and he said, yeah, I'm filling up the ditch, but Sunday morning I'm taking the dirt out. So now we have two opinions. There is one opinion that says, no, you can't join in a combined erev, because I know you're going to take the dirt out. We don't assume the dirt is there. But this is a machlokes. There's two different opinions. So the Mechaber, the Chavetz Chaim says, Uladina halacha lamaisa. Nearer it seems to me the kevinchu divrei seifrim. Since over here we're talking about a derabanan, the whole din of Berurah chatzeros is only a din derabanan. Yesh lismach lahakel. We could rule leniently, and therefore you could take it either way you want. Imratzu ma'arvin yachad. We could assume, we could look at it that this dirt is there in the hole and it closes up the hole, and therefore there's no ditch, and therefore you could join in one combined erev. But on the other hand, v'imratzu marvin shnayim, or if they want, we could say that since this dirt is not going to remain there forever, since the person who put the dirt there plans on removing the dirt on Sunday morning, we could look at it as if the dirt is not there, and therefore the ditch does make a separation between the two chatzeros, and therefore they could make two individual eruvin if they want. Chatzerei and Chatzerbi could each make their own erev, and they do not have to look at each other as being one chatzer. Says the Ramah, top of Reish Ben Beis Amud Beis, Hagah. Yeshayim, there are those that say, the emilon beperos. Let's say you filled up the ditch not with animal fodder, not with dirt, you filled it up with produce. Stama bitlayla. Then we could assume that even minastam, even if you didn't make any kind of verbal declarations, we could assume that the produce is going to stay there, and therefore we look at the ditch as being full, and we look at the chutzner as being one chutzner, and therefore they only have one option. They could only make one joint erev. They can't make two separate eruvin. Why? The darkon lasay sham oitzer, because it is normal to use a ditch in a field as a storage area for produce, and to leave produce there for a significant amount of time, and not to use it as an area that you're constantly taking produce out of. And therefore, since the produce is in the ditch, we assume that the produce is going to remain in the ditch for a lengthy period of time, and the ditch is considered full. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and kuf chav hey. It's normal to use this kind of ditch as a storage area, man, for a significant amount of time, and not to use it to constantly take produce out of. However, the Mishnah Berurah says, you should look at the Magen Avram, he disagrees with this ruling. So to the Gra, Hiskim L'Dvarav agrees with the Magen Avram, and they ruled the Dafka Beperes Tfalim, only when we're talking about tevel produce, which cannot be eaten because you didn't remove trumas and meisos from it yet. Shehu davar she'ena nitl b'Shabbos. That's something that you're not going to use on Shabbos. V'lachein stama mavutal. Then you could assume that the peros are considered mavutal. The produce is considered nullified, and we could look at the ditch as being full. Hashar peros. But if we're talking about regular produce that's not tevel, shamutar lehistapik mehem. We're talking about fruits and produce that you could use on Shabbos. Stama ena mavutal. Then minastam, it's not considered to be nullified unless you made a verbal statement that you're nullifying it. Says the Mechaber Weiter. One second. Okay, we start here. Okay. Says the Mechaber Weiter in Sif Yud Zayin. Nasan olav neser kimin gesher misvas hacharitz el svasai. Let's say you bridged over the ditch. So again, we have a ditch that's 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim across, and it separates between colony A and colony B. But now the caretaker came and he laid a sheet of plywood over the ditch. So now you have a bridge over the ditch that is at least 4 tfachim wide. So now you have a doorway between the two colonies. Now you have a doorway between the two chatzeros. So like the Mechaber says, Nasan alav neser kimin gesher misfasa charitzel sfasai. Let's say you put a board like a bridge bridging the gap over the ditch from one side to the other. So imu rachav arba, if it's at least 4 tfachim long, 4 tfachim across, in other words, the bridged over area takes up 4 tfachim in the length of the ditch, chashiv kepesach, that constitutes a doorway between the two chatzeros, uma arvin echad. And now, if they so desire, they could join into one joint combined eruv. Or if they want, since it's only a Pesach, they could make 2 separate eruvim. V'im ratzum arvin shnayim. Or if they want, they can make 2 separate eruvim. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in kuf chavav. Imu rachav arba. If the bridge is at least 4 tfachim long, then it constitutes a Pesach. If on the other hand, this plank that you put over the ditch is less than 4 tfachim long, meaning in the length of the ditch, it takes up less than 4 tfachim, command the lesadamya, then it's insignificant. It's as if it's not there. Umarvin shnayim dafka, and they're 2 separate chatzeros. There's a little plank that goes across the ditch. If it's less than 4 tfachim, it can't constitute a doorway. It's as if it's not there. So they're 2 separate chatzeros, and they have to make 2 separate eruvin. But if it's 4 tfachim chashiv kepesach, then it makes a doorway. Because even if the ditch goes for a long way, and it separates the 2 chatzerim over a very, very long way, but still you have a 4 tefach area where you could go across. You have a bridge to go from one to the other. So it's the same as if you had a fence and a gate. So you have it's true, you have a fence, but you have a gate that allows you to go from one side to the other. So over here you have a ditch, but you have a bridge. So this bridge connects the two if you want them to be connected, and if you want, you could join in one combined eruv. Okay. And if you so desire, you can make 2 separate eruvim. Vim ratzuma arvin shnayim. If you want, you can make 2 separate eruvim. Vida. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but you should realize, we're only going to call this bridged over area a doorway. Now what does that mean, a doorway? Remember, a doorway means if you want, we could view the 2 chatzeros as being joined, and they could join in one joint combined eruv. Or if you want, since it's only a doorway, we could view the doorway as being closed, and they can make 2 individual eruvin. A doorway always gives you the choice. So V'da, you should realize, we don't consider it a doorway so that you could go either way. Only if the bridged over area is a minimum of 4 tfachim long in the length of the ditch, up to 10 amos long. But if it's more than 10 amos long, chashiv kepirtza. Now it's no longer a doorway that gives you the option of being closed, and if you want, you can make 2 individual eruvim. No, now it's a pirtza. Now it's a breach between the 2 chatzeros. Valkein im sasam acharitz b'nesaram ad yosem yeser amis barkai. So if you bridged over an area longer than 10 amos, then you would have to make 1 joint eruv. You couldn't make 2 separate eruvin. So again, this is the same din as if you have a wall between 2 chatzeros. Let's say you have a wall between 2 chatzeros. If you have a gate, so if the gate is 4 tfachim wide, 4 tfachim, the opening is 4 tfachim wide, up to 10 amos wide, so it's a doorway. If it's a doorway, you have a choice. You can make 1 joint combined eruv, or you can make 2 separate eruvim. But what would be if you had a fence, and the fence would have a breach in it that's bigger than 10 amos? If the breach is longer than 10 amos, then it's not a doorway. Then you have no choice. You can't be considered 2 separate chatzeros. You're breached one to the other, you're 1 chatzer. Same is true by a ditch. If you have a ditch and you bridge over the ditch, so the bridge is a doorway. That's only if the bridge is 4 tfachim to 10 amos. If the bridged over area is more than 10 amos long, that's not a doorway, that's a breach. Now you're 1 chatzer whether you like it or not. Now you don't have the option of making 2 individual eruvin. You have to make 2 separate eruvin. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going to mention another case, but he's really jumping the gun a little bit because we didn't see this halacha in the Mechaber yet. What the Mechaber is going to say is there's another way you can make a doorway between the two chatzeros by bridging the gap. You don't have to bridge the ditch completely, meaning you don't have to put a board that goes totally from one side of the ditch to the other. Let's say the ditch is 4 tfachim across. Now, we said that a ditch that would be less than 4 tfachim across, let's say you have a ditch that's 10 tfachim deep, but it's only 2 tfachim across. That doesn't make a separation between the two chatzeros because you could step right over it. So let's say you had a ditch that was 8 tfachim across. Well, 8 tfachim across definitely makes a breach, right? It definitely makes a separator between the two chatzeros. It's more than 4 tfachim. But let's say you put a sheet of plywood on one side of the ditch and you left the gap. The sheet of plywood doesn't go all the way across to the other side. But now, from the edge of the plywood to the other side of the ditch is only 3 tfachim. So guess what? Now you no longer have a 4 tefach gap. Once you don't have a 4 tefach gap, you don't have a divider between the two chatzeros. So the Mishnah Berurah is going to say over here, that also makes an effective bridge. And the same halacha that we just said would apply. If you bridged over an area in that way, so you didn't go all the way across, but you narrowed the gap. So if you did that for an area that's 4 tfachim up to 10 amos, that constitutes a doorway. Now you have the option. You could make one joint combined eruv, you could split up into 2 separate eruvin. If you made such a situation more than 10 amos, so for a length of more than 10 amos, you narrowed the gap between the two chatzeros to less than 4 tfachim, that's a breach. Once you have a breach, you only have one choice. You have to make one joint combined eruv. You cannot make 2 separate eruvin. So now we'll just see this inside in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, by where you have the Ois Cotton Tzadik Aleph for the Shar Hatzion. So we're in middle of Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Kuf Chav Ches. Ois Nosa Neser Echad, or if you placed one board la'orech hacharitz, along the length of the ditch, on one side of the ditch. You didn't go across the ditch from side to side. You laid a board on one side of the ditch, along the length of the ditch. B'yoser me'eser amos, for an area that's longer than 10 amos. Umi'et sham hacharitz me'roichav arba tfachim, and in that area you lessened the gap between the two sides to less than 4 tfachim. Chashiv kepirtza b'yoser me'eser amos, that would constitute a breach that's longer than 10 amos, and you would be forced to go make one eruv because it's one chaser v'loy shtayim. Over there you don't have the option of making 2 separate eruvin because it's not a Pesach, it's a breach. Okay? Let's continue in the Mechaber now. Now we're going to see that case in the words on the Mechaber. No, first we have to see the Ramah. The Ramah says Hagah. So again, we're in the middle of Sif Yud Zayin. Hagah, the Ramah says, V'hu adin im miloi beroichav arba b'davar hamavat lo sham. Another case would be if you filled up part of the ditch. So you filled up a 4 amma long area of the ditch with afar and tzroiros, with dirt and pebbles that you're going to leave there. So that's going to constitute a doorway. Says the Mechaber Vayter, if you laid a board, this is the case I just explained to you, you laid a board along the length of the ditch on one side, the meshach arba, in an area that's longer than 4 tfachim, afilu ein ba'ela kol shehu, even if that board is tiny, as long as it lessens the gap between the two chatzeros less than 4 tfachim, chashiv kepesach, that makes a doorway. Shaharei mi'atoy me'arba, because you lessen the gap between the two chatzeros to less than 4 tfachim. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Kuf Chaf Tes, B'meshach arba, you cut down the gap for a length of more than 4 amos. What he means to say is, even if this board that you laid on one side is only 4 tfachim long, that's enough to make a doorway between the two sides. The Baal Mashir Pesach hu barba tfachim, because the minimum size of a doorway is always 4 tfachim. V'ya'amidenu al gabi yiseidos. What's going to support this board? If this board is only on one side of the ditch, so what supports it in the middle of the ditch? So obviously you're going to have some kind of pegs or some kind of supports coming off the wall of the ditch. Kol shehu, this board could even be minute, it could even be very small. It might only be very, very small in the width, meaning in the direction that it goes over the ditch. It makes a doorway. And now, if they want, they have a doorway between the two chatzeres, and if they so desire, they could join into one combined eruv. Okay, go a little bit weiter. Okay, Sif Yud Ches. Before I read Sif Yud Ches inside, I'm just going to explain Sif Yud Ches to you outside. So it's the exact same halacha that we saw earlier in Siv Vav. Siv Vav was very complex, but since we did it already, we already get it, because we know all the concepts. Let's remember what we said in Siv Vav. You have Chatzer A and you have Chatzer B. Chatzer A and Chatzer B are separated by a 10 tefach tall wall. And let's assume right now that the wall is 10 tefachim from both Chatzeros. So whether you approach the wall from Chatzer A or from Chatzer B, the wall has a height of 10 tefachim, and the wall is 4 tefachim thick. So since the wall is 4 tefachim thick, we said that wall is considered a makom chashuv, right? It's a makom chashuv. What's the din of the top of that wall? We said, if you have a keli sheshavas b'chatzer, so let's say you had apples that started off Shabbos in either Chatzer A or Chatzer B. You could take those apples from Chatzer A or from Chatzer B and put them on top of the wall. You could take apples from the top of the wall and you could take them down either into Chatzer A or into Chatzer B. Why? Because the top of that wall has a din of being part of the Chatzer. If you remember, we said earlier that whether it's a rooftop or whether it's the Chatzer or whether it's a karpev, kol ha-chatzeros, v'agagin, v'akapifos, they're all considered one rishus when it comes to the dinim of a ruve chatzeros. So if you have a keli sheshavas b'chatzer and you want to put it on top of the wall, you can. Either one of the chatzerim could do that. However, when it comes to a keli sheshavas babayis, you want to take, let's say Chatzer A made an Eruv Chatzeros, and Chatzer B made an Eruv Chatzeros. They have to make their own separate Eruv Chatzeros because they're separated by a wall that's 10 tefachim tall. So they each made their own separate Eruv. Now somebody wants to take an apple from inside his house, and he wants to take it and put it on top of the wall. Neither one of the Chatzeros are allowed to do that, even though they each made their own Eruv Chatzeros. Why? Because the wall, the top of the wall is 4 tefachim thick. That's a makom chashuv. The makom chashuv cannot be bottled to 2 chatzerim. It can't be included both in Chatzer A's eruv and in Chatzer B's eruv. That's not possible. It has to be one or the other. Who are we going to give it to? Can't give it to either one. So the halacha is that neither one of the chatzerim could use the top of the wall. That's simple. Now, what if the grade of Chatzer A and the grade of Chatzer B are not the same? So if you approach the wall from Chatzer A, the wall is 10 tefachim tall. But if you approach the wall from the higher Chatzer B, the wall is only 5 tefachim tall. Then we said the din is different. Then we said we give the wall to Chatzer B. Because for Chatzer B, it's Noach Tashmishtei. Chatzer B only has 5 tefach height to approach the wall. So they are allowed to use the top of the wall, even for kelim sheshavsu babayis, because the top of the wall is considered part of their eruv. Chatzer A, to whom the wall has a height of 10 tvachim, they're going to lose the wall completely. They can't use it for kelim sheshavsu babayis, but they can't even use it for kelim sheshavsu b'chatzer, because they can't be using the wall when Chatzer A is also using the wall. Says the Mechaber over here in Sif Yud Ches that the same exact halacha applies to the ditch. If the ditch is 10 tefachim tall and 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim across, then neither one of the chatzeros could use the depth of the chritz for kelim sheshavsu babayis, because it's a makom chashuv and it cannot belong to both chatzeros. So it can't belong to Chatzer A's eruv and to Chatzer B's eruv. So neither Chatzer A nor Chatzer B could use the ditch for kelim sheshavsu babayis. But if the grade of Chatzar A and Chatzar B are different, so that from Chatzar A, the ditch is only 5 tefachim deep, but from Chatzar B, the ditch is 10 tefachim deep, then guess what? Chatzar A gets the whole ditch, because it's noyach teshmishtei, it's only 5 tefachim deep for them, so they could use it even for kelim sheshavsu babayis. The other chatzar, to whom the chritz is 10 tefachim deep, they're going to lose the ditch completely. Now let's see it inside. Says the Mechaber in Sif Yud Ches, if the ditch is deep to one side 10 tefachim, but from the other side it's not 10 tefachim deep, or in a case where it's equally deep to both sides, so it's 10 tefachim deep to each side, the din is the same as what we saw in Sivav by a wall. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and kuf, Lamed Gimel, Shebein Kuf Lamed Beis, Ice cut and kuf Lamed Beis, Dinai Kekaisel. The halach is the same as the wall. Hamavur kol pratav b'sivav, or like we saw all of these details earlier in Sivav. Shamarvin shtayim ve'emarvin echad. That when you have a wall between two chatzeros that's 10 tefachim tall, it's 2 separate chatzeros. They have to make 2 separate eruvin. Same 2 over here. If the chritz is 10 tefachim deep, they have to make 2 separate eruvin. V'chein le'inyanim hayamunach peres b'chritz. So too, the halach is the same as the wall. If there are apples, let's say, down inside the ditch, shehu amay kasara, if the ditch is 10 tefachim deep, v'rachav arbon, it's 4 tefachim across, she'ein yechelim lahaitzi misham labayis v'loy mibayis l'seichai. You cannot take apples from inside the ditch and bring it to the houses in either one of the chatzerim, nor can you take apples from the houses of either chatzerim and bring them to the ditch, because the ditch cannot be bottled to both chatzerim. It can't be part of each one's eruv. However, im le'echad amek asara, if to one chatzer the ditch has a depth of 10 tefachim, v'la'sheni ene amek asara, and to the other chatzer it does not have a depth of 10 tefachim, kigoyin shekarkoi shalechad hayanamach mechaveroi. For example, if the grade of the 2 chatzeros are different, noistim lazel lehishtamish by, then we give the wall to the one that it's nicha tashmishtei, lehishtamish by shaloi nicha tashmish to be yoser. We give it to the one who has easier usage of the ditch. Va'akol kanal ayin sham, completely like what we saw in Sivav, like I just spoke out. That concludes today's shir. I hope tomorrow we'll be able to say shir in person, or I won't be able to say shir in person tomorrow. I have Sheva Brachas tomorrow night as well, Baruch Hashem. I'll try to get a stand-in. If I cannot get a stand-in, then I guess we are going to record a shir tomorrow and post a shir tomorrow as well. Thank you, and I can't wait to see you again. Be well. Bye.